certainly have fears that there is a serial killer at loose in Perth.
Sarah Spears, Jane Rimmer, Kira Glennon.
And every time you saw a young girl walking by, you think, oh God, is she going to be the next victim?
Now, one man stands accused.
If police are right and Edwards is the Claremont serial killer, he's been hiding in plain sight for 20 years.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Claremont In Conversation. It has been 11 weeks since Justice Stephen Hall retired to consider his verdict, and now the moment of truth is almost here. You're with Natalie Bonjolo, the West Australian's Legal Affairs Editor Tim Clarke, and from Channel 7, Alison Fan. Welcome back to you both. It's been a while.
It has been a long while.
Yeah.
But we've been very busy, even though we may not have been putting up podcasts over the weeks. We have been working feverishly behind the scenes, haven't we, Tim?
Well, I have. I don't know about you, Ali, but it has been a full nearly 3 months between drinks. But here we are, and here we go.
And I think, this is going to be such a momentous decision. Can you describe the anticipation of this verdict?
Well, I'm nervous, and I told Carmen Barbagallo the other day when she texted me that I was nervous.
Why are you nervous?
I don't. Well, it's just big. It's just going to be such a big day, and it affects not only Bradley Robert Edwards, but everyone that has been in his orbit, I suppose, if you want to call it that way, in the trial for the last 3 years. I'm nervous for the families of Jane, Kira and Sarah. I'm nervous for the living victims of Mr. Edwards. I'm nervous for the prosecutors and the defence that put all the work in. And I'm nervous for Justice Hall because, he will undoubtedly be the most watched man in Western Australia next Thursday.
I think because also there's such unprecedented public interest. We've certainly seen big trials and big verdicts. I remember when America's Cup hero Alan Bond got sentenced, it was a stampede, it was a crush of media, but not so much public actually wanting to attend there. It was, of course, all the international media that pumped that up. But this time it's the mums and dads who are very, very connected to this case and have been for 20 years because it's one that involved the entire community.
That's right. It almost is like a community is part of this trial. And
They will be directly a part of this trial.
That's right. And I don't know about you two, but I cannot count the amount of times I've been asked in the last 11 weeks what is going to happen. And of course, only one man has the answer to that.
Same. I've been asked the same question a lot of times, and a lot of different questions a lot of times as well about the case, about how I think the case went, how I think it's going to go. I'm always reluctant to give a sort of an answer to that because, firstly, you want to seem knowledgeable about the case, and if you give the wrong answer, then you look like you haven't been paying attention. But as you say, Nat, there's only one man who really knows. I mean, you can make an educated guess based on everything you've heard. And it also seems that everyone else has got a different opinion or a slightly amended opinion on based on what they've heard and what they've written, read and seen over the last sort of year or so.
I'm quite surprised at the doubt that a lot of people have expressed about certain factors. They seem to focus onto one thing that they hear and don't want to let it go. And there is quite a bit of doubt from the community about a successful outcome for the prosecution, which surprises me because I think it's pretty cut and dried.
I think that's a good thing, really. That says to me that they actually have been, and we know they have been, sort of paying very close attention because there is doubt there, or that there certainly is doubt there. If you listen to what Mr. Jovich said over the course of the trial, and certainly in the course of his closing arguments, and that is obviously what his job was, to raise the possibility of a reasonable doubt. And so, we will finally find out next Thursday whether he succeeded or not.
And it's interesting that the judge has kept to the date that he stated. He did say that if he finished earlier, he would bring it forward, but he's using every second.
Every moment that he gave himself, yes.
And do you read anything into that he has taken the full amount of time?
Only that he's being very, very cautious.
Yeah.
He, as I said right from the very start, on what's on the mind of most judges is the possibility of an appeal. And so I think this is why he's being super careful, and has all throughout the trial has interrupted some testimony and clarified it. He wants his clarification so that he does not want an appeal on this case.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he's probably given himself as much time as he felt was necessary. But speaking to people around the court environs, it was also quite important for them to be given as much time as they could. Security guards, people involved in the actual mechanics of putting on this day, because it is going to be a day, like a big day, probably one of the biggest days that the West Australian justice system has dealt with. Certainly for the last one I can see is the Lloyd Rainey verdict, which was in 2012. That was a huge event, if I can put it that way, in terms of the outcome, but obviously all the mechanics and all the people that go around it. And so court staff were quite wary and quite aware of it was coming up, and they needed a date eventually to work towards, so all the other arrangements could be put in place.
That's right. And just talk us through what you're anticipating on the day in terms of the logistics. I mean, for instance, there's massive roadworks happening right on the steps of the courthouse.
Well, I've been told that they're going to be called off for the day. This is literally going to stop traffic. There are major roadworks going on Hay Street, which is where the District Court building is situated in Perth. It is quite a tight sort of little area that all the lawyers and courts and barristers sort of occupy, and that is being dug up at the moment, and that has involved diggers and saws and major sort of street works. But I was informed today that the construction companies involved have agreed to stop work that day, because there are going to be so many people and so much activity in that very small area. No, as Ali said, a lot of cameras, a lot of reporters, a lot of public, a lot of people, a lot of cars dropping people off and picking people up. There'll be police, there'll be detectives, there'll be old detectives, there'll be, it'll just be
Everyone.
a lot of activity. And so I've been told that they have agreed to do that out of an abundance of caution, I think.
And I wondered just how many people will show from the general public, because, just from the emails we've received in recent weeks of the amount of people who are saying, how do we go? What time should we get there? How will we get into the courtroom? I wonder if the courts have any kind of a guesstimate at the public attendance.
Well, they certainly have a finite number of seats in the main courtroom, and they will now know today exactly how many people that will be allowed in there, given social distancing. So we were told today there will be two courts, other courts apart from Court 72, where the physical verdict will take place. There'll be two other spill courts that will be able to house members of the public and interested parties, which the verdict will be live broadcast into. So there's another main courtroom at the other end of the corridor on the 7th floor of the District Court building. So that is another very big court, will probably seat at least 100, I would think. So that will be open, and then there'll be another court in the old Supreme Court building, which again can hold up to 60, 80 people, I suppose. So those two have been set aside for spill courts, and then all the other media rooms that were active during the trial itself will also be available. So they are, you can take it from them, the rough guesstimate, they are anticipating hundreds of people to want to be in the court. Now, the main courtroom, obviously, there will be a significant amount of space put aside for the families of Jane, Sarah and Kira, the families of the other living victims, police, detectives, both current and retired, as myself and Ali were informed last week. And then there's 2 rows for the media, and that will be first come, first serve. Anyone who can't get in, or is there no room for their seating, then they will have to make other arrangements, and then after that there will be room for members of the public. So just so many moving parts. Going back to, as I say, this is not just a case of Justice Hall sort of ringing up and saying, right, I'm ready. There has been internal briefings and all sorts of things going on, preparing for what is going to be a major day.
Tim, they're starting a good hour earlier. Does that mean that the courts will be open earlier, I wonder?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So the verdict itself will start at 9:15, which is earlier than the trial was starting, and that itself, because the court building itself won't open, or doesn't usually scheduled to open at 8:30. So I would imagine that they might open the court a little bit earlier, just to accommodate everyone that's going to need to be in there quite early. Including broadcast media, who will be doing sort of live crosses from outside the building from sun up, I would have thought.
And Ellie, will there be any chance that the verdict will be filmed and then broadcast?
Well, the verdict will be filmed and broadcast, but just not by any of us. The courts have now got the technology and the know-how to be able to do that, and we're told that they will be providing us all with an actual video of the actual findings, and we're hoping that it'll be a summarised version, and he won't be reading out all his reasons for everything, which could take hours, but that will be provided, and it will also be up on the websites of the Supreme Court, but no one's allowed to record it or republish it. So they will get, I should imagine, a camera locked on to the judge, so that no other vision will be available, and we will hear his exact words. How long we have to wait for that, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So those who don't get into the courtroom, they will still be able to see Justice Hall deliver his verdict.
Just not live.
Not live.
It's not going to be broadcast live. It's not going to be actually live streamed onto the Supreme Court website, but it will be uploaded ASAP after the hearing is finished, and will remain there for at least a week, I think, or just over 5 days. I think they're going to go from the 24th and take it down on the 29th. So everyone who by then will really want to see it will be able to have a viewing
because
of it.
Of course, everybody's just waiting to hear the actual words, guilty or not guilty.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we were talking about this just outside, whether Justice Hall puts us everyone out of their misery early and delivers his verdicts and then goes into his reasons, or then starts his reasons and waits to give his verdicts after he's explained why. We don't know, and that will be entirely up to him. Some judges do deliver verdicts first and then provide some reasons. The reason behind that is it can be seen as quite sort of cruel, I suppose, in some way, or certainly very stressful for those very involved parties to have to wait while the verdicts, while the sort of reasoning is being given. So, and some, I have seen some accused people very anxious in the dock, and some judges make that judgment call right on the day. It's going to help this process if I tell you now what's happening, and then I'll give you the reasons, or I'll give the reasons I need to. So I've seen Justice Hall do some and some of these sort of written or verbal reasons before, and in those cases he has waited till the end. But it'll be interesting to see how he structures it, how long it goes for, and most interest obviously will be the verdicts and why he reached them.
Yeah, and you cannot fathom the stress and the anxiety that those connected to the case and the victims' families would be feeling. How will they be taken care of on Thursday, Ali?
They've been surrounded throughout this whole case with their own personal detectives who have been ushering them in through a special entrance, taken care of. They've been counselled the whole way in a case that I've never seen that before, where they've actually protected virtually the whole time. They've got their own special police detective that's there to explain things, to protect them, and that should happen. But of course, with this case, no matter what the verdict, the ordeal for the Spears family, because Sarah has never been found, that's not going to end on this day. There's not going to be any answers for them either way.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, as we've said all along, your thoughts always go to Don and Carol and Dennis and Una and Lee and Adam and Jenny first, because it's a day that they've all waited for so long, and a day a lot of them never thought might arrive, but it is now here, it is now in the diary, and you know, we just hope it goes the way that they all hope they want it to go.
Yeah, I'm sure they feel physically ill as it gets closer and closer. And Tim, you mentioned feeling nervous almost for Justice Hall. You know, he is an exceptional human being, but he's also a man. Do you think he is also feeling nervous? You know, this is a huge weight that he is carrying.
We, amongst the media pack, I mean, we do joke about judges and their different characteristics, and Justice Hall, as you say, is an exceptional jurist, and he has a certain manner in court, which I think is fair to say can be quite bluff. He can be quite blunt when he wants to be. He's got a very dry sense of humour, but as you say, Nat, he's a man. He's married. He has children of his own, and I don't think you would be human unless you did feel some of the weight of the responsibility that has been placed on him. But I have absolutely no doubt, from the time he's taken, from the observance of him during the trial, that you know, there will be no stone left unturned, no thought left unpondered in the last 12 weeks and previously, that you know, he won't have missed anything. He won't have missed a thing, and I think that will become you know, clearly evident as he delivers his verdict next week.
Yeah, I mean, Ali, you mentioned Lloyd Rainey and Damien Cripps, who obviously is a member of our podcast team. He sort of said that, you know, for him, you know, the only thing that he can liken to this is perhaps the Bernies back in 1980s. For people not from WA, David and Catherine Burney were a couple here in Perth in the 1980s, in 1986, and they lured young women to their home where they raped and tortured and murdered them. And in 1987, they were sentenced to 4 consecutive sentences of life imprisonment. Do you think that's how is it along a similar lines?
Not really, because the Bernies pleaded guilty, and the only public interest was fleeting, because when they first appeared in the Supreme Court, and at that time there was no walls protecting them, a few outraged members of the community came and shouted at them, but because there was no trial and they pleaded guilty, it was all over very, very quickly. That was, of course, our first I guess, look at a serial killer, so to speak. But that was a very unusual case, as the detectives have pointed out, because they found the victims before they found the actual offenders. And so it was very, very fast. It all happened over a matter of days. This one, of course, has dragged on for such a long time, and that's the unique part of it. It's 2 decades. And while we all thought it had gone very, very cold, we found out just recently that it was open the whole time, that they were working on it the entire 20 years.
Yeah.
And the other very notorious multiple killer in Western Australian history is a guy called Edgar Cook, who was a very, I mean, they're all unique cases, but his case was extremely unique in that he shot people, he ran people over, he was a very brutal killer. Serial killer, and you know, the darkness that he inflicted on Western Australian society in the 1960s spanned decades as well, because it turned out that 2 men had been convicted of crimes that Cook had actually done himself, and there was an amazing book by a journalist called Estelle Blackburn called Broken Lives that basically blew the lid off those 2 miscarriages of justice. The reason I bring that case up is for all Cook's crimes, he only ever spent about a day and a half in court during a sentencing hearing, which was extremely brief. And given the gravity of his crimes, and Cook ended up being one of the last men hanged in Western Australia for his crimes, that sentencing hearing in a capital case that ended up in a death sentence lasted 2 days. And we were in this case, we were in court for a trial for more than 6 months, and for numerous hearings that were longer than 2 days in the 3 years previous to that. So that is why this case is unique again, because of just the length of time, and now the abundance of material and evidence that we have before us, whereby for years and years and years the journalists and the speculators had to live on scraps of what what the case of the Claremont killer was.
Yep, it was an absolute vacuum at times. And of course, you mentioned an amazing book, which brings me to a question. Some of you listening may think that after sitting through a 95-day, very intense, very gruelling trial, that Tim may have taken a bit of a break, but you would be wrong, because he was exceptionally busy. And can you just share with everyone what you've been doing during the break?
So a lot of people mentioned during the trial and before that there is obviously a book in this case, and I was asked by the editor of the West Australian if I would be willing to take that task on and write a book about the case. So that's what I've been doing for the last little while in between the end of the closing arguments and Thursday. I've sort of took myself away to various public libraries around Perth, and that's what I've done. So it's mostly written. Obviously, the last couple of chapters will be written themselves in the next week, and then a little bit beyond that. So that is the case from literally the start to the finish. Is what I've endeavoured to try and capture. It's in the very capable hands of one of the West sub-editors at the moment as we speak. He's probably in a little room down the hall just putting the finishing touches to the last bits. So that'll be available hopefully before the end of the year, or definitely before the end of the year, and hopefully it's well received.
And it's called Enigma of the Dark. And this was in reference to something Carmel Barbagallo said. Yeah,
so the Enigma of the Dark was the phrase that Carmel used in one of the very early paragraphs, very early stages of her opening address. In that she said it was an enigma of the dark that had sort of had Claremont and Perth in its thrall, and then the trial and the case and the prosecution and the evidence were intended to cast some light on that enigma, on that puzzle, it was a phrase that we used on the front page of the newspaper on the first day of the trial, and it was the phrase that stuck with me throughout the trial because I thought it captured perfectly what Perth had lived through. It was an enigma, it was a puzzle, it was a mystery, and obviously all those crimes were committed or allegedly committed under the cover of darkness. And so I did do the courtesy of Carmel of contacting her and asking her for permission if I could use that phrase, because it was hers. I did think that I should do that out of courtesy, and she very kindly said, it's something I use, it's something in court, and so that is the title of the book, hopefully it does capture some of that enigma, and we will find out if it has been solved and how much of it has been solved next week.
And we're quite excited because you've got some extracts in the papers this weekend which we will be able to read. So there's a lot of excitement around to just see what are in the pages.
Yeah, given the size of the case and given that it will be next week, the editor did tap me on the shoulder the other day and say, is any of it ready? No
pressure.
No pressure. So there was, on Saturday and Sunday, there will be some a couple of chapters from the early pages of the book for people to read and enjoy and give me undoubted feedback on. So I'm looking forward to seeing it in print and not just on my laptop.
Yes, well, extraordinary hard work, and just shows the meticulous person that you are and what you have been through this entire case. And Ali, you've also been working on an application which could be very interesting.
Yes, while we're reading Tim's book, ours is purely oral, and we've been working on an affidavit. Well, I've been working on an affidavit with our lawyers to try to obtain the actual police arrest video that faithfully records step by step the minute police burst through the doors of Bradley Robert Edwards' home in Kewdale in December 2016 and what happened from then on. This is an application that has to be made to the judge, whether he agrees to release that, but I think it's important that the public does see the way they conducted that interview. There was no usual perceptions of a police arrest, that it was all done very, very professional, very courteous, and also I think what is important is his demeanour, because what a reporter can't do accurately is report the tone of a person, and while I might describe it as a monotone or bland, that could be a distortion. Someone would say, well, no, he always talks like that, but what struck me was Bradley Robert Edwards' response to this surprise raid, a tone and demeanour that he's continued all through this entire trial, and almost impossible to describe until you hear it. And so hopefully we'll get that for podcast listeners maybe in the future.
Yeah, because you said many times it was actually very difficult to give a full picture and make people understand what it was you were listening to and seeing in the courtroom.
It was quite astonishing. I've never seen a reaction like that from someone. If you have, there's an entire task force, police burst through your front door. There was a bit of bewilderment, but nothing really that was that anybody would normally react to. And just the way they came through the door, and they do it step by step. They record what they're saying. They record everything step by step, so it's there to be seen and heard. For this raid and arrest that everyone's waited 20 years, and it's the very first time you hear the voice of Bradley Robert Edwards, his response to the questions to these murders.
Yeah, and that, of course, was one of the most impactful moments of the trial, but there were so very many of them. And, Tim, for instance, you talked at the very start about sitting in court and listening to the voice of Sarah Spears.
Yeah, and getting some sort of our print coverage ready for next week's sort of papers leading up to Thursday. It was again, just thinking back, it was just one of those moments that will always stick with me, but certainly stuck with me during the trial, because it was just so. It brought everything to life, if you like. I mean, and I've talked about before that the names of Sarah and Jane and Kira, they were sort of burned into the psyche of Western Australia, and we felt like we knew them, and certainly people who lived through the time of the disappearances certainly felt a kinship to those three young women, because they had lived their lives. They'd been to Claremont, they'd been to those pubs, they'd probably tried to hitchhike home or got a lift from someone that maybe they didn't know that well, and that's why everyone felt so close to the case. And then knowing the victims as you came to think you did, but you'd never heard from Sarah. We eventually did see Jane on the CCTV when they released it many, many years later. We certainly hadn't seen that CCTV of Kira that we also saw in the courtroom. But there was something about the voice, the Australian accent, the youth in it, because Sarah was only 18, and the fact that it was so ordinary, as such an ordinary phone call to make, calling a cab after a night out. Where are you going? Muswell Park. Okay, thanks. Name Spears. Bye. And that was it.
Yeah.
But that was it, because that is the last moment that we know of that Sarah was alive. to hear it in those circumstances with some of Sarah's nearest and dearest close to you was a very vivid moment for anyone who was in that court, and it remained one of the vivid moments of the whole trial.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, that audio wasn't released by Justice Hall out of respect for the family, as was a lot of information that was presented as evidence. And I think for many people, just hearing the recounting of the final nights of the victims, this was information we had never ever heard before, and this was information that is still shocking when you think back about it.
Yeah. Again, Sarah's friends, Jane's friends, Kira's friends, the taxi driver that was supposed to pick Sarah up, the young men in the car that think they saw Sarah leaning against that bollard, the numerous witnesses that think they saw Kira, the couples that heard the screams in Wellard and in Mosman Park. You when you piece that all together, it presents a compelling picture. But then each one of those accounts is a story in itself and an experience in itself, and obviously so vivid for so many of those people because they got visibly upset while retelling those tales from so many years ago. And then particularly Tammy Evans and Mr. Atkinson, who were the unfortunate but vitally important people who stumbled across the bodies of Jane and Kira, who were both obviously still very affected by that moment in their life, which became a very big moment in everyone's lives in Perth, and still, the sight of Mrs. Evans recounting her contact with Jane and the fact that she refused to leave her alone.
Yes.
And then Mr. Atkinson's obviously visibly affected by the memory, but then his very slight but very meaningful gesture of just touching Dennis Glennon's hand as he exited court again were just very, like, tiny moments really, but very telling of how much this this experience and this part of the story affected them and affected everyone.
Yes, and just as you mentioned, so many coincidences and sliding door moments, and what if this had have happened or this hadn't have happened? Jane would never have been found, or Kira would never have been found if it wasn't for this extraordinary series of events.
Yes, I think a lot of the emotional parts of the trial was when you actually saw their friends who are now in their late 40s and 50s and who are still in agony about the what ifs.
Yes.
Why didn't we force her to come with us? Why did we persuade her to come with us? In Kira's case, Kira didn't want to go, but her friends who've now given evidence, they're lawyers, they look back and think, well, we forced her to go. Why did we do that? So they're still haunted by that. And I think that when it brought it all home, that here are these people in their 50s, their mothers, they're at the peak of their professions, and there's Kira and Jane and Sarah back then. And a lot of that's, I think, quite something you'd never, ever forgive or forget.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess just wading your way through the forensic evidence and the fibre evidence, it was really tough going and very difficult to cover and to explain to everyone. But I think, that moment when you told us about the male DNA profile being found, I think for many people that was, wow, this is the sort of thing you'd hear about or read about in a crime thriller.
Yeah, I mean, that is the eureka moment, the breakthrough moment, the landmark moment, however you want to call it. And as much as it was, quite, the evidence around it was quite dry in terms of all the tests that had to be done and the processes that we had to go through and try and understand and try and explain. There was still an anticipation in the court of getting up to that very moment when the DNA was discovered in the UK, and then that email came back to Perth. And And since reporting on this trial, Perth being Perth, my path has crossed with a couple of people that didn't give evidence, but were certainly involved in the wider scheme of that breakthrough and that news filtering back from the UK, and the people that I've spoken to have recounted how they will never forget where they were when that phone call came, or that email dropped, or that news was relayed to them. Because again, 96 Sarah went missing, 97 Kira's body was discovered, 2008 was when that DNA was finally found after so many dead ends and false hopes. And so, yeah, it is a moment in time that depending on what Justice Hall finds on Thursday, will become one of the most significant forensic findings in Western Australian justice.
That's right. And I think, depending on which way the verdict goes, or either way, that this could have a really huge impact on cases going forward.
Yeah, I think so. For various reasons. Obviously, the obvious reason is everyone wants to know whether they've caught him or not. But there will be a lot of different elements to the mass findings that Justice Hall will make on Thursday that will have serious legal repercussions. Obviously the strength of DNA evidence, this particular type of DNA evidence, this low copy number, it'll have an impact on the reputation of Path West, because of all the contamination events that we heard about and what Justice Hall finds about those and maybe comments about those. Propensity evidence, circumstantial evidence or circumstantial murder cases, in particular with Sarah, because there is no body and there seems to be a paucity really of direct evidence of what he finds there. All those things will be scrutinised very closely, not just by me and anyone who's been reporting on the case, but much wider than that, certainly in the legal community in West Australia and beyond. And very much so Paul Jovich and Mr. Edwards' defence teams, because they'll be poring it over it to see if they think
you're going to use that word appeal.
One way or the other, if there are convictions, whether any of that reasoning might be slightly flawed, and so they might have grounds for appeal. Yeah.
And speaking of Mr. Jovich, I mean, I think it was very surprising, or a surprising moment for many of us during the trial, Ali, when Mr. Jovich presented his defence and it was over in the blink of an eye.
We've still got a lot of questions over that particular one, especially about the temperatures of Gosnells on Australia Day. I don't know whether we'll ever find any resolution to that, but yes, it did end very abruptly, considering that his bombshell opening was, you've got the wrong guy, and then it ended.
Yeah, the case ended, but then he spent a week doing his closings. So, that was really when he tried to punch as many holes as he could in the prosecution case. His closings actually went longer than Miss Barbara Guller's did eventually. And there was a lot to digest in those closing arguments for a lot of different reasons, because that was where obviously all the threads and all the questions of disparate witnesses, which at the time, out of context, you think, why has he asked that? And then when the closing arguments came together, you realised that's where he was trying to get to.
Just to go over something too that people have asked about Edwards not giving evidence, and Tim, the Justice Hall did take the very unusual step of telling Paul Jovich, I'm going to direct this question to your client directly. Do you want to give evidence? Because he didn't want anything coming back from Edwards saying, I wished I'd given evidence.
I wasn't given the
And
chance, or I didn't understand.
Exactly. So he asked him direct, and he said no.
And that was thinking about it now. It was sort of in the same vein of the way that the interview, or the start of the recorded interview, was conducted, because we mentioned at the time the police asked Mr. Edwards over and over and over again whether he understood his rights, whether he wanted to have a lawyer, whether he knew whether he had to answer a question, or any question, or all the questions, or no questions. They made it. They tread so carefully at the start. And Tom Percy, when we talked about this at the time, Tom Percy, who was very kind to give us some of his time during the trial to explain these things to us, was, I think it's the most complimentary I've heard Mr. Percy on about any policeman on any time I've talked to him over the years, because he said, look, they did everything 120% by the book, and which is obviously the way it should be done every time, but unfortunately we know possibly it isn't. And so I think Justice Hall maybe took some lead from that, or certainly used the same reasoning to say there, I am going to make sure absolutely everybody knows everything was done for Mr. Edwards to be given the chance to give evidence if he wanted to.
And no grounds for appeal.
Which, again, just closes off another, or if there ever was going to be one, an avenue of possible doubt or possible recrimination, some way down the track.
Just sitting here and talking with you both now, it is almost mind-boggling how much information was got through in that trial. It is absolutely gobsmacking how much was presented.
And in that time as well, Nat. I think
that's right.
I've spoken to a lot of people that said they did bloody well to get through all that in six months or so. And I know, particularly during the fibre evidence, I hope,
it was exhausting.
I hope some of the audience felt my pain, and I hope I didn't inflict any of it on them, because we were trying every day to sort of go through the process, and that's what they had to go through, the process. Now, look, there were a few raised eyebrows amongst a few people saying, why do we have to do it this way? But that was the way it was chosen to do it. But even that, they got through it in a week or so with 98 critical fibres. So yeah, they did it. I think everyone involved in actually structuring and getting this trial to the start and then to the finish should be praised for their,
especially with the COVID restrictions.
Yes, well, and that's the thing. Throw in a global pandemic.
Sling in a pandemic in the middle of it.
Yep.
And again, I was preparing for next week. I reviewed what Justice Hall said on that day, and he said, paraphrasing, the world outside is changing, but we will not. And there was a steely determination. We have got this far. We are not going to stop now. And I'm
going to bring in my own hand sanitizer.
I mean, COVID be damned. So.
That's right. And Kate, our producer, was speaking to Damien Cripps yesterday, and he said to her, I remember thinking to myself, well, good luck to anyone in the next 100 years who tries to present a reason why a case cannot go ahead, because this case found a way to go ahead because the people of Western Australia needed it to go ahead.
Yeah. And that, and that's what he said from the start, from the very first day. He said, this is a very important trial. I know it's a very important trial, and everyone will treat it as such. And he was true to his word.
Well, exactly 1 week, Thursday, the 24th of September, you will be back in the courtroom after a break and waiting for probably the most important verdict ever handed down in West Australian criminal history. We will be back on that day with the podcast. Good luck to you. I know you're probably right to feel nervous, Tim, and I think absolutely everybody associated with this trial is probably feeling nervous. So not long to go now.
No, not long to go, but it'll fly by because there's plenty of work to do in between now and then for us media types. And as I said, I just hope that the day goes as well and as smoothly and as it can do for those closest to this case and the victims in this case.
Yeah, and you can keep up with all of Tim's stories at thewest.com.au and see Alison's reports on 7 News. We'll be back next Thursday, and we hope that you can join us then for Claremont In Conversation, The Verdict. Bye for now.
This podcast is hosted by Natalie Bonjolo, produced by Kate Ryan, and recorded in the studios of 7 West Media. Sign up for daily emails and all the latest on the Claremont trial at thewest.com.au. And if local news delivered differently appeals to you, tune into WA's newest morning show, The West Live with Jenna Clarke. It's talkback radio, but without the interruptions. Listen live weekdays from 8:45 a.m. on thewest.com.au or catch up with the podcast.